History is often taught as a series of dates, battles, and the rise and fall of powerful empires. In school textbooks, the past can sometimes feel distant, predictable, and sometimes even a little boring. But what if some of the strangest stories in history sound less like reality and more like something from a movie? What if I told you that one war in history lasted less than 40 minutes? A man somehow survived 2 atomic bomb explosions. One of the most powerful emperors in Europe was once defeated by rabbits. Cleopatra actually lived closer to the moon landing than to the pyramids. An entire European city once danced uncontrollably for weeks. A real military operation ended with soldiers losing a war to birds. And even the legendary Vikings had a very unexpected relationship with cats. These events sound unbelievable, but they actually happened. Welcome to The Killer Gardener, a place where we explore strange, fascinating, and unbelievable stories from history. In this video, we're going to uncover 7 historical facts that sound completely impossible, yet are absolutely real. Some of them are funny, some of them are mysterious, and some are almost impossible to comprehend. But before we begin, I'm curious about something. Write in the comments how old you are. It's always interesting to see what age group is watching the channel. And if you enjoy unusual history and strange real events, don't forget to subscribe to The Killer Gardener so you don't miss the next video. Because history isn't just about empires and politics. It's also about coincidence, human mistakes, strange decisions, and the unpredictable nature of life. So let's begin with something that almost doesn't sound like a war at all. Throughout history, wars have lasted years, decades, and sometimes even generations. Entire civilizations have been shaped by conflicts that dragged on for centuries. But one war in history was so short that many people don't even realize it happened. It took place on August 27, 1896, between the powerful United Kingdom and the small island nation of Zanzibar, located off the coast of East Africa. At the time, Zanzibar was heavily influenced by the British Empire. The British government wanted a friendly ruler who would cooperate with their interests in the region. When the previous sultan suddenly died, a man named Khalid bin Bargash quickly seized the palace and declared himself the new ruler. The problem was simple. The British hadn't approved him. British officials immediately sent a message demanding that Khalid step down and leave the palace. They gave him a strict deadline, but Khalid refused. Instead, he gathered soldiers, armed the palace guards, and prepared to resist. British naval warships quickly moved into the harbor, positioning themselves directly in front of the palace. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the ultimatum expired. 2 minutes later, at 9:02 a.m., the British fleet opened fire. Cannons from several warships began bombarding the palace. The wooden structure quickly caught fire as shells slammed into the building. Zanzibar's defenses were completely outmatched. Their artillery was outdated, their soldiers were poorly prepared, and they had little chance against the British Navy. Within minutes, much of the palace was destroyed. By 9:40 a.m., the fighting had stopped. The palace was in ruins. Hundreds of defenders had fled or surrendered, and Sultan Khalid had escaped through a back door and sought refuge in a nearby German consulate. The entire conflict had lasted approximately 38 minutes. This made the Anglo-Zanzibar War the shortest war ever recorded in human history. In less time than it takes to watch a TV episode, an entire war had begun and ended. In August 1945, the world witnessed one of the most destructive moments in human history. During the final days of World War II, the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan, forever changing warfare and the future of humanity. But within this terrifying chapter of history lies an almost unbelievable story of survival. The man at the center of this story was Tsutomu Yamaguchi, a Japanese engineer working for Mitsubishi. In early August 1945, Yamaguchi was on a business trip in Hiroshima. On the morning of August 6th, he was preparing to leave the city when something unusual caught his attention. High above the sky, a single American B-29 bomber was flying overhead. Moments later, there was a blinding flash. The atomic bomb detonated. The explosion produced a massive shockwave that flattened buildings, shattered windows, and instantly killed tens of thousands of people. Yamaguchi was thrown violently to the ground. Despite severe burns and injuries, he survived the blast. Incredibly, after receiving basic medical treatment, he decided to return home. His home city was Nagasaki. 3 days later, on August 9th, Yamaguchi arrived at work and began explaining to his boss what had happened in Hiroshima. Many of his co-workers found the story hard to believe. A single bomb destroying an entire city sounded impossible. Then, suddenly, there was another blinding flash. Another atomic bomb had just been dropped, this time on Nagasaki. Once again, Yamaguchi survived. He suffered additional injuries, but he lived through both explosions, an experience that almost no one else in human history has endured. Years later, the Japanese government officially recognized him as a double atomic bomb survivor. He lived a long life and spent many years speaking publicly about the horrors of nuclear war. His story is a reminder of both the terrifying power of nuclear weapons and the extraordinary resilience of the human body and spirit. When we think about Napoleon Bonaparte, we imagine one of the greatest military commanders in history. He defeated powerful European armies, reshaped political borders, and ruled much of the continent. But one of the strangest stories about Napoleon has nothing to do with war. Instead, it involves rabbits. In 1807, after negotiating an important peace agreement with Russia, Napoleon decided to celebrate with a traditional aristocratic pastime, a grand rabbit hunt. His chief of staff was given the task of organizing the event. Hundreds of rabbits were collected and released into the countryside so that Napoleon and his guests could enjoy a dramatic hunting experience. But there was a problem. Instead of capturing wild rabbits, the organizers had gathered domesticated rabbits from farms. And domesticated rabbits behave very differently from wild ones. When the cages were opened, the rabbits did not run away. Instead, they ran directly toward the hunters. Within moments, hundreds of rabbits began surrounding Napoleon and his men. They jumped onto boots, climbed onto clothing, and chased the emperor across the field. Napoleon reportedly tried to wave them away with a riding crop. It didn't work. The rabbits kept coming. Eventually, the situation became so chaotic that Napoleon was forced to retreat to his carriage. Even then, the rabbits continued chasing the vehicle as it left the scene. It remains one of the most bizarre moments in the life of a man who conquered much of Europe. A moment when Napoleon Bonaparte was defeated by a swarm of rabbits. When people imagine ancient Egypt, several images usually appear at once. Towering pyramids rising from the desert, golden pharaohs ruling vast kingdoms, and one of the most famous women in history, Cleopatra. Because these images are often presented together in movies and books, many people assume Cleopatra lived during the same era as the pyramids. But history tells a very different story. The Great Pyramid of Giza was completed around 2560 BC, during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu. At the time, it was the tallest structure humans had ever built. The pyramids were already ancient monuments long before many famous civilizations even existed. Cleopatra, however, lived much later. She ruled Egypt from 51 BC to 30 BC. That means the pyramids were already about 2,500 years old when she was alive. To understand how strange that timeline is, consider this. The Apollo 11 moon landing took place in 1969. The time between Cleopatra's life and the moon landing is about 2,000 years. That means Cleopatra lived closer in time to astronauts landing on the moon than to the construction of the pyramids. History often compresses thousands of years into a single image. But when you break the timeline apart, the past becomes far more surprising. Throughout history, humanity has experienced many strange and mysterious events. Plagues, natural disasters, and unexplained phenomena have shaped entire societies. But few events are as bizarre as something known as the Dancing Plague of 1518. It happened in the summer of 1518 in the city of Strasbourg, which at the time was part of the Holy Roman Empire. One day, a woman named Frau Trophea walked into the streets and began dancing. At first, it didn't seem particularly strange. People dance in public celebrations all the time. But there was something different about this situation. She didn't stop. For hours, she continued moving, spinning, and jumping through the streets. Witnesses described her dancing as frantic and uncontrolled. Soon, night arrived, but she kept dancing. The next day, she was still dancing, and the day after that. Within a week, something even stranger began to happen. Other people started dancing too. At first, there were only a few, then dozens. Eventually, hundreds of people in the city were dancing uncontrollably. Many of them said they could not stop, even though their bodies were exhausted. Some collapsed from fatigue. Others reportedly died from heart attacks, strokes, or extreme exhaustion. City authorities had no idea what was happening. Instead of stopping the dancing, they actually made the situation worse. Doctors at the time believed the dancers had overheated blood, and that the only cure was to keep dancing until the illness left their bodies. So, the city built wooden stages and even hired musicians to play music for the dancers. This decision caused the phenomenon to spread even further. More people joined the dancing crowds. Eventually, the authorities realized something was terribly wrong and banned public dancing entirely. Historians still debate what caused this strange event. Some believe it may have been a case of mass hysteria, triggered by extreme stress and famine that people in the region were experiencing. Others suggest that contaminated grain may have caused hallucinations or neurological reactions. Whatever the explanation, the dancing plague of 1518 remains one of the strangest collective events ever recorded. An entire city dancing uncontrollably for weeks. When people think of wars, they usually imagine armies, tanks, and complex military strategies. But one of the strangest conflicts in modern history involved soldiers fighting birds. In 1932, farmers in Australia were facing an unusual problem. Large flocks of emus, giant flightless birds native to Australia, were invading farmland and destroying crops. After World War I, many soldiers had been given land in Western Australia to start farms. These farms became extremely vulnerable to wildlife, and emus were particularly destructive. Each bird can stand nearly 2 meters tall and run at speeds of up to 50 kilometers per hour. When thousands of emus migrated through farmland, they trampled fences and consumed huge amounts of crops. Farmers became desperate and asked the government for help. In response, the Australian government made an unusual decision. They sent soldiers armed with machine guns to eliminate the emu population. The operation quickly became known as the Great Emu War. At first, the soldiers believed the mission would be easy. After all, they were trained soldiers with modern weapons. The emus had other plans. When the soldiers approached the birds, the emus scattered into small groups and ran away at incredible speeds. Machine gun fire proved surprisingly ineffective. The birds were fast, unpredictable, and difficult to target. In one famous incident, soldiers mounted a machine gun onto a truck to chase a flock of emus across the countryside. But the truck couldn't keep up with the birds on rough terrain, and the gunner couldn't aim properly while bouncing across the landscape. The mission quickly turned into a frustrating and embarrassing situation. After weeks of effort and thousands of bullets fired, the military operation ended. The emu population had barely been reduced. In the end, the birds had essentially won the war. To this day, the Great Emu War is remembered as one of the most unusual military conflicts in history, a war where trained soldiers were defeated by wildlife. When people imagine the Vikings, they usually picture fierce warriors sailing across the seas in longships, raiding villages, and fighting epic battles. But Viking culture was far more complex than just warfare. In fact, animals played an important role in Norse society, especially cats. In Norse mythology, cats were closely associated with Freya, one of the most important goddesses in the Norse pantheon. Freya was associated with love, beauty, fertility, and magic. According to legend, her chariot was pulled by 2 enormous cats. Because of this connection, cats were considered sacred and were treated with great respect in Viking communities. But cats were not only symbolic, they were also extremely useful. Viking ships carried large supplies of grain, food, and materials, which attracted rodents. Rats and mice could easily destroy food stores during long voyages. Cats solved this problem. They hunted rodents and protected valuable supplies. Because of this, cats often traveled on Viking ships and lived in Viking settlements. Over time, cats also became associated with courtship and relationships. In some historical accounts, young Viking men would give cats as gifts to women they wished to marry. This gift symbolized both affection and practical support. Owning a cat meant better protection for food supplies and a more stable household. In a harsh northern environment where survival depended on preparation and resourcefulness, even a small animal could make a huge difference. So, while Vikings are remembered for their swords and ships, sometimes their most meaningful gifts were much quieter. A small cat, offered as a symbol of trust, partnership, and survival. History is often stranger than fiction. A war that lasted less than an hour. A man who survived 2 atomic explosions. An emperor defeated by rabbits. A city that danced for weeks. And soldiers who lost a war against birds. These stories remind us that the past is not just a collection of dates and events. It's a record of human decisions, unexpected accidents, strange coincidences, and moments that no one could have predicted. And perhaps the most fascinating part is that we still haven't uncovered every story. For every famous historical event, there are hundreds of lesser-known moments that are just as surprising, waiting to be rediscovered. Because history isn't just about what happened, it's about the unbelievable stories hidden inside it. And sometimes, the truth is far stranger than fiction.